3. "Where's Frida?" the old-timers questioned, while the Chautauquas were equally energetic in asking who Frida was. The ballroom buzzed with her name. It was on everyone's lips. Grizzled sourdough boys, day laborers at the mines, but proud of their degree, either patronized the spruce-looking tenderfeet and lied eloquently, the sourdough boys being specially created to toy with truth, or gave them savage looks of indignation because of their ignorance. Perhaps 40 kings of the upper and lower countries were on the floor, each deeming himself hot on the trail and sturdily backing his judgment with the yellow dust of the realm. An assistant was sent to the man at the scales, upon whom had fallen the burden of weighing up the sacks, while several of the gamblers, with the rules of chance at their finger ends, made up alluring books on the field and favorites. Which was Freda? Time and again, the Greek dancer was thought to have been discovered, but each discovery brought panic to the betting ring and a frantic registering of new wagers by those who wished to hedge. Malamute Kid took an interest in the hunt, his advent being hailed uproariously by the revelers, who knew him to a man. The Kid had a good eye for the trick of a step, and the ear for the lilt of a voice, and his private choice was a marvelous creature who scintillated as the aurora borealis, but the Greek dancer was too subtle for even his penetration. The majority of the gold hunters seemed to have centered their verdict on the Russian princess, who was the most graceful in the room, and hence could be no other than Frida Muluf. During a quadrille, a roar of satisfaction went up. She was discovered! At previous balls, in the figure "all hands round," Frida had displayed an inimitable step and variations peculiarly of her own. As the figure was called, the Russian princess gave the unique rhythm to limb and body. A chorus of "I told you so's" shook the square roof beams, when lo, it was noticed that Aurora Borealis and another mask, the Spirit of the Pole, were performing the same trick equally as well. And when the two twin sun-dogs and Frost Queen followed suit, a second assistant was dispatched to the aid of the man at the scales. Bettles came off trail in the midst of the excitement, descending upon them in a hurricane of frost. His rhymed brows turned to cataracts as he whirled about. His mustache, still frozen, seemed gemmed with diamonds, and turned the light in varied colored rays, while the flying feet slipped on the chunks of ice which rattled from his moccasins and German socks. A Northland dance is quite an informal affair, the men of the creeks and trails having lost whatever fastidiousness they might have had at one time possessed, and only in the high official circles are conventions at all observed. Here, caste carried no significance. Millionaires and paupers, dog drivers and mounted policemen joined hands with ladies in the center and swept round the circle, performing most remarkable capers. Primitive in their pleasure, boisterous and rough, they displayed no rudeness, but rather a crude chivalry more genuine than the most polished courtesy. In his quest for the Greek dancer, Cal Galbraith managed to get into the same set with the Russian princess, towards whom popular suspicion had turned. But by the time he had guided her through one dance, he was willing not only to stake his millions that she was not Frida, but that he had his arm about her waist before. When and where he could not tell, but the puzzling sense of familiarity so wrought upon him that he turned his attention to the discovery of her identity. Malamute Kid might have aided him instead of occasionally taking the princess for a few turns and talking earnestly to her in low tones, but it was Jack Harrington who paid the Russian princess the most assiduous court. Once he drew Cal Galbraith aside and hazarded wild guesses as to who she was, and explained to him that he was going in to win. That rankled the Circle City King, for man is not by nature monogamic, and he forgot both Madeleine and Freda in the new quest. It was soon noised about that the Russian princess was not Frida Muluf. Interest deepened. Here was a fresh enigma. They knew Frida, though they could not find her, But here everybody had found, and did not know. Even the women could not place her, and they knew every good dancer in the camp. Many took her for one of the official clique, indulging in a silly escapade. Not a few asserted she would disappear before the unmasking. Others were equally positive that she was the woman reporter of the Kansas City Star, come to write them up at $90 per column, and the men at the scales worked busily. At 1 o'clock, every couple took the floor. The unmasking began amid laughter and delight, like that of a carefree children. There was no end of ohs and ahs as mass after mass was lifted. The scintillating aurora borealis became a brawny negress whose income from washing the community's clothes ran at about $500 a month. The twin sun dogs discovered mustaches on their upper lips and were recognized as the brother fraction kings of El Dorado. In one of the most prominent sets, and the slowest in uncovering, was Cal Galbraith with the Spirit of the Pole. Opposite him was Jack Harrington and the Russian Princess. The rest had discovered themselves, yet the Greek dancer was still missing. All eyes were upon the group. Cal Galbraith, in response to their cries, lifted his partner's mask. Freda's wonderful face and brilliant eyes flashed out upon them. A roar went up, to be squelched suddenly in the new and absorbing mystery of the Russian princess. Her face was still hidden, and Jack Harrington was struggling with her. The dancers tittered on the tiptoes of expectancy. He crushed her dainty costume roughly, and then the revelers exploded. The joke was on them. They had danced all night with the tabooed native woman. But those that knew, and they were many, ceased abruptly, and a hush fell upon the room. Cal Galbraith crossed over with great strides, angrily, and spoke to Madeleine in polyglot Chinook, but she retained her composure, apparently oblivious to the fact that she was the cynosure of all eyes, and answered him in English. She showed neither fright nor anger, and Malamute Kid chuckled at her well-bred equanimity. The king felt baffled, defeated. His common Siwash wife had passed beyond him. "Come," he said finally. "Come on home." "I beg pardon," she replied. "I have agreed to go to supper with Mr. Harrington. Besides, there's no end of dances promised." Harrington extended his arm to lead her away. He evinced not the slightest disinclination towards showing his back, but Malamute Kid had by this time edged in closer. The Circle City King was stunned. Twice his hand dropped to his belt, and twice the king gathered himself to spring, but the retreating couple passed through the supper room door, where canned oysters were spread at $5 the plate. The crowd sighed all audibly, broke up into couples, and followed them. Freda pouted and went in with Cal Galbraith, but she had a good heart and sure tongue, and she spoiled his oyster for him. What she said is of no importance, but his face went red and white at intervals, and he swore repeatedly and savagely at himself. The supper room was filled with a pandemonium of voices, which ceased suddenly as Cal Galbraith stepped over to his wife's table. Since the unmasking, considerable weights of dust had been placed onto the outcome. Everyone watched with breathless interest. Harrington's blue eyes were steady, but under the overhanging tablecloth a Smith & Wesson balanced on his knee. Madeleine looked up, casually, with little interest. May I have the next round dance with you?" the king stuttered. The wife of the king glanced at her card and inclined her head. End of The Wife of a King.